So I ended up going with Diane to a rehearsal, met Wynton Marsalis, met all the major people at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and began to form a relationship with them. And ironically, one of them told me, Ken Burns is hiring. I realized there was something missing when I decided to go to film school in the first place, because that's the whole reason why I wanted to write for a different world, because I saw myself on screen.
Change the Reel, a podcast with Monique Velasquez and
Piper Kessler. For over 20 years, we've run a video production business that has achieved what only 3% of women entrepreneurs have done.
exceed $250,000 in revenue. We want to see business owners that look like us succeed. That's why we've started this podcast.
Change the Reel will drop twice a month.
We'll release 2 types of episodes. One is with Piper and I kicking it and talking about using video in business.
And the second features conversations with business owners using media to drive diverse perspectives. This is Change the Reel.
Representation starts here.
Hey, y'all. I'm Monique Velasquez.
And I'm Piper Kessler. We're talking about representation in media, and I'm excited to get to know and introduce our guests, Natalie Bullock Brown, someone that really puts action to the idea.
Natalie is the Distinguished Director of the Documentary Accountability Work Group, DAWG. I love that. A collective she helped to found in 2020, which has produced a value-informed framework for documentary filmmakers that emphasizes care, consent, and collaboration in ethical storytelling. She is also a documentary film producer and emerging director, a 2023 Harvard Kennedy School Shorenstein,
I think.
Shorenstein.
Thank you.
Center Director, Documentary Film Fellow. I love that. In 2023, Doc New York City New Leader, and in 2021, Rockwood Institute Just Films Fellow. Natalie is a documentary film producer with 20 plus years combined experience in producing, production management, directing, and archival research, licensing, experienced assistant professor, and served as a department chair. She earned a Master of Fine Arts in Film Production from Howard University, Bachelor in English from Northwestern, along with her other fellowships.
And I met Natalie on a couple of productions and was very happy she found me and hired me as a sound person. And I gotta give out kudos and props and thanks for creating a set that was very comfortable, extremely organized, and I really enjoyed being on and with everybody that was in the production.
There we have it. I'm really excited to have this conversation, so I'm going to check in with you. How are you doing today? You feeling comfortable? You feeling secure?
Yes. The world is on fire, but I actually feel pretty good today.
Okay. Well, we want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing as a trend out there. In our 20 years in a production company, we've done documentaries, and what I'm hearing, the fellows and the ethical filmmaking, is the idea of not about us without us. And I'm thinking that is probably where you're leaning with what you talk about. Is that a fair assessment? Talk about that a little bit.
I appreciate that assessment. It's a part of what I think is behind the spirit of DAWG. But what we're really advocating for is filmmakers being more thoughtful, intentional, transparent about their filmmaking practices in their relationships with their participants, their funders, the audience, and also the idea that when you don't have proximity to a potential or to a particular story, that it's important for you to acknowledge that, to think about who you need on your production team to help you overcome your blind spots, but also, even more importantly, to do that internal work that's going to help you to keep your biases about people, places, and things from showing up in your film. And we believe at DAWG that if you do that work, it creates a much better film.
Who would you like to give flowers to because their effort is spot on? Maybe you've met them, maybe you work with them, maybe you haven't. Who would you like to acknowledge as doing a good job in this area?
Well, the first person there's two people that come to mind. One is Ava DuVernay, who I've never met, but I teach, and one of the classes that I've had the privilege to teach is African American cinema. And I have always just been really enamored of Ava because she walks the walk. She doesn't just talk it, she walks it. She has a lot of integrity. She's done so many things to promote equity and inclusion within the entertainment field. But as a Black woman, I've really appreciated the ways that she has surrounded herself with people who can help her tell the stories that she tells. But she also picks stories that I think she is uniquely situated and equipped to tell. And I appreciate that about her as well. And she gives people opportunities to participate in that storytelling. But I also want to shout out Byron Hurt because he is the director that I've been working with for, wow, it's been about 8 years now. I've worked with him on 3 films. And Piper worked on, I believe,
Hazing.
But also you worked with us on a piece we did for a nonprofit. That was the work that we did specifically in Durham at at the Hayti Heritage Foundation. So I worked with Byron Hurt for 8 years, almost 9 years, on about 4 or 5 different projects. Byron, I met soon after, about 10 years after I graduated from grad school, from film school. And at that point, I had done some work in the documentary film industry, but I had not begun to make my own films. But what Byron did was to extend what really motivated and inspired me to become a documentary filmmaker in the first place, which was seeing the work of the Black queer filmmaker Marlon Riggs when I was at Howard. Love him. He is the reason I am in documentary film to this day, because I went to Howard to become a writer in Hollywood. I wanted to write for A Different World, which was the spinoff of The Cosby Show. That dates me quite a bit, but that's okay. And I saw Marlon Riggs' Tongues Untied, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what you can do with documentary filmmaking? Are you kidding me?
That was my thought exactly when I saw that film. It's like, this is what you can do with a documentary. I mean, I was working in the business and we were doing, segments and stuff. And it's like, wow, now that was so artistic and so like feeling, right? That feeling of understanding what the subject was about was mind-blowing, and grateful for grad school for exposing me to that as well.
Yes. I won't say that I never would have come across Marlon Riggs, but maybe not, because I think it's completely apropos that I was exposed to him at Howard University. I don't know that I would have been exposed to him at another program. Entirely grateful to Howard for having professors and electives of all things, because it wasn't within my film program. I happened to take a class where I was exposed. So it's, the universe was at work for sure. Those 3, Marlon Riggs first, then Byron, then Ava, they've really been huge inspirations to me in my filmmaking pursuits. And I have to give a special shout out to Madison Davis Lacey, who is a documentary filmmaker of an older generation who I met on while working with Ken Burns on his jazz series. Dave was the only producer that was Black. He was working on a film called Free to Dance, aired on PBS in the late 90s, early 2000s. But an amazing mentor, amazing filmmaker, and someone who I have cherished as a friend ever since. I mean, I've known him for now almost 30 years.
Well, that is enviable. Good for you. I'm super curious. What made you go to grad school to go for an MFA? Because you said you wanted to write, but what led you down that path?
Yeah, it's a great question because, I mean, as you know, I mean, I think we all experience this when you're in college. You come in thinking you're going to do one thing and then you change like 2, 3, 4 times before you settle on something. And honestly, Monique, I wanted to go into news and television production. And I applied to all kinds of programs and I could not get in. I did not get into any of them. And I think it's principally because I didn't major in that when I was an undergrad. I majored in English. And so I didn't have any sort of work sample or, project that I could use to demonstrate my ability, right? What I'd learned. Fortunately, Howard didn't require that and was the only place that I got into. And I got into their MFA program because they didn't have a television production program. But the rest is history. It was the best decision, best, sort of lucky strike that I could have had. It changed the course of my life.
It's amazing what school will do, right? Do you have classmates or peers that you're still in contact with from the program?
I do. Every single person that I was in school with, for the most part, there are people that were in my cohort. I came into Howard with a class of 5, and I think I'm the only one that stuck with film. Other cohorts that were a little older than I am, by 1 or 2 years, they continue to do work in the film world. In fact, some of them have gone on to do amazing things. And one of the alums that I never got to meet, but that I really respect and admire is Bradford Young, who is a cinematographer in Hollywood. And he came to the MFA program at Howard maybe 4 or 5 years after I did. But he's completely taken off. He's worked with Ava. He's worked with Shala Lynch. He's done all kinds of
Yeah,
films.
some great body of work there. So amazing, right? I'm curious too, women of color, I have similar experience in this field. What was it like starting out and getting your first, because you look at the other classmates, where are they? I'm very, very, very grateful to be able to work in this industry where I know most of my classmates do not. They're either teaching in a peripheral in marketing. So what's it been like for you as a woman of color?
We really need to have this conversation with red wine and popcorn, I think, because it's been a journey. It has been a journey. Wow, what a question. On the one hand, I was very fortunate when I graduated from Howard. I moved to New York immediately upon graduation, like a month later. I really believed that if I could make it there, I could make it anywhere. And I was able to do or eventually find my way into filmmaking because I moved to New York to basically be an assistant manager to 2 jazz musicians. That was my entry into New York. And because I was working with jazz musicians, one of whom was the singer Diane Reeves, I was able to make contacts at Jazz at Lincoln Center because I happened to start working with her when she was going to be performing at Jazz at Lincoln Center. Her manager at the time that I was working with, she was going out of the country. So I ended up going with Diane to a rehearsal, met Wynton Marsalis, met all the major people at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and began to form a relationship with them. And ironically, one of them told me, Ken Burns is hiring. Well, no, Ken Burns is doing a documentary series about jazz. You should apply. And when I called, they were like, we don't have any positions, but you can be an intern. And I was like, I got to pay my bills. So, okay, thank you, but no. And it kind of, again, the universe was at play because I ended up applying for a job at Jazz at Lincoln Center that I didn't get, but I went far enough in the interview process that I interviewed with the executive director who asked me point blank, what do you really want to do? Do you want to do jazz education, which was the job, or do you want to make films about jazz? And I had to be honest, I wanted to make films. So he gave my resume to his across the hall neighbor, who happened to be Lynn Novick, who is Ken Burns' longtime producer. And then the same person who told me that I could only get an internship with Florentine Films, Ken's production company, that same person called me and asked me to apply for a job.
I find that like my path it wasn't what I knew, it was who I knew.
Absolutely.
It became a lot of those connections. Granted, I could do it all. But it became more about who I knew. And I agree, this is kind of a like sit back and have a glass of wine and chat about sort of thing. And, we are very lucky to have you in this field, in this space. Not many women in the space of creating content. We know that, people of color and women are not at the top of the game. We can point right now to Shonda Rhimes and, Oprah Winfrey. And then there's a gap. What happens after that? Who is making content?
Right. So do you remember the moment in time when you realized that representation was missing? And the second part of that is, how did that push you to want to make and create change in the industry?
I realized there was something missing when I decided to go to film school in the first place, because that's the whole reason why I wanted to write for a different world, because I saw myself on screen. At that time, which was the late 80s, early 90s, I went to Howard in 1991. There weren't a lot of programs. I mean, we've definitely come a long way in terms of representation, but there weren't the diversity of experiences that Black folks and people of color more broadly have represented on the little or big screen, right? So in grad school, I really kind of experimented with ways to tell stories that would elevate Black voices in particular and our experiences. And that took a variety of forms, but I definitely, can say with all certainty that I wanted to go to grad school because I knew that there was a dearth of represented experiences of Black folks and people of color. But Howard really nailed home for me that not only was it important, but that I could do it. Like it gave me the confidence to know that I had something to say and that I had a natural affinity and inclination towards the work of production. It has served me, I think, really well over the years, especially as I have gained more experience and really begun to have confidence in my ability to tell a story.
Being in the classroom and being able to encourage young folks, what is your strategy right now to help promote the idea that they have a voice and that they should be in media and use it? How are you cultivating this?
I have been a mentor for a variety of young people of color, mainly young women of color, for some years. And I guess I'm not so focused on encouraging them to be in production as I am in really zoning in on their gifts and using those gifts in whatever ways feel most appropriate and that also reflect their passion. A mentee who has really become like a little sister to me, who started off, like, when I met her, she was in grad school, also a Howard University graduate, I have to say. But she was in grad school at NYU as a dance major. She met Spike Lee and became a film major, then left school altogether because she realized that wasn't what she wanted to do. And at every step of the way, I got it, I get it, because this is what happens when you're on a journey, right? You're trying to figure out how the gifts, the things that you're most interested in, that you're most passionate about, can translate into something that you can do as a career, not as a job, but as a
Something
career.
that comes from the heart.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because I really believe my mom said this to me a long, long time ago. And I really, well, in this present situation or environment, I'm not sure how true this is anymore. But I did believe that if I pursued what I was passionate about, that the money would come, because I would do the work out of love for the work, not because I had to do it trying to make a dollar, right? And that has pretty much proven to be true for me. And I see it working. I've seen it work in the lives of other young people. And I really try and instill that in my kids. I think that when you have a passion for whatever it is, that is something that you were put on this earth to do. Like it translates, it reflects, and we have to tap into, okay, why is it that I'm interested in this? Why is it that I can't think of anything else, that I don't want to do anything else, that this makes me feel alive? Because there's something there that we have to, understand, to be almost like that touch of God that is going to propel you towards your destiny. I don't mean to be like philosophical, but I really believe
Right,
that.
something that's going to move your spirit, that really keeps you in it every day. I'm curious how you pick projects. Do they come to you for the most part, or do you reach out? And have you had to say no to any for any specific reason?
So I am that kid that wanted to do everything. And I'm that kid that wanted to do everything because I wanted to make everybody happy. So one of the things I have had to learn how to do is to say no, because I'm only one person and I can only really give my best to one or two things. So that's really what I use as a sort of measuring stick. Is this something that speaks to me? Is it something that I feel that I can give 100% to, or give my best to, that I can really help propel forward? And if I don't feel like I can, then I usually say no. I may try and help in some supportive role, something other than what maybe someone wants me to do, maybe what they approach me about doing. So I try and help, but I try not to take on, work as a producer or a director or some other major role unless I can like fulfill that in a way that's going to make me feel good about my contribution.
And so what I know about you as a producer type is from Piper, and she said that you were very intentional on how you build your crews and who you worked with. So talk about having that freedom and being able to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Piper. Thank you. I'm glad you saw that. When I worked with Ken Burns, I didn't really have any sort of agency over who I would hire. There was sort of a crew that was already in place, right? When I had the chance to make decisions about who I was going to include on my crew, particularly the work that I have been doing on my own film for the past 8 years, the first crew that I hired was all women. Every single last person, the cinematographer, everyone was a woman, or, a queer person, and queer women in particular. And they came from a variety of backgrounds. The cinematographer was Cuban. The production assistant was Black. The sound person was white. The gaffer was Latina. The, oh my gosh, what was the other position? Oh, the AC was from either the Philippines or Indonesia. But the point is, we had a rainbow, and it was amazing because we worked together so well, and I wish I could show you what we produced together, but it was so beautiful, and it totally embodied what I wanted that work sample, that piece that we were putting together at the time to look like. That does not mean that I don't want to work with men or anyone else. It just simply, at that time, it was really important to me to flex that muscle, right? And to be able to dictate who I wanted on my crew, because I knew that that would not always be the case. Working with Byron, he really gave me a lot of flexibility to say who I would and who I would not hire. And sometimes I made good decisions. He always, sort of co-signed or weighed in on those decisions. And sometimes they weren't good fits. And you learn from that and you keep going. But Piper, I'm going to say the crew that we had in Raleigh and Durham with Piper and Ish and Mark Moore, the gaffer, like everybody that worked with us, they were amazing. And it was a good time on set. And I'm glad that, Piper, you at least felt like it was a comfortable and good feeling for you to work with us. That's really important to me.
I have to say, it's unusual. I mean, it's not totally painful for other crews that I'm on. I don't want to say that. But I know when Monique and I get to do our own projects and we get to pick the crew, we're very deliberate on who we pick. And to be on a set where it was obvious that someone had thought out and it just seemed more thoughtful. And then also I got to say, when I got a phone call from folks in LA, and sometimes it's like, well, I'm weighing, okay, how much of my time is this going to take and all. When they said that you recommended me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And I'm so glad that they told me that's how they got my name, because the productions that I have gotten to be on, because you passed on my name and I was available, it would have been a disappointment to me not to be on those sets.
And they were.
And that was, I really, really appreciate you passing on my name, and I appreciate the fact that they said it was you that passed on my name, because that automatically goes, oh, well, this should be interesting, let me listen.
And so what happens there, we talk about, representation in front of the camera, a lot of that, right? And we talk about what's happening behind the camera. We've had this conversation between us, how we do some code switching in front of people. And if there's a shortcut to being comfortable behind the camera, like I know if you're the producer or have something to do with the production, there's a shortcut. It's like, okay, I don't have to wear as big a shield. If I get called into corporate something or another, I am going to wear heavy armor and, stand in my place. And so there's something to be said for having different people in the lead positions, in the executive positions, in the content creation and putting these things together. So we appreciate that you're out there and that you are doing it in a thoughtful way. And that's a big reason why I wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah. So flowers to you.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot. I mean, really, it truly touches me that you've had good experiences, Piper, from the recommendations that I've made to other productions. That's important because it's not something we can take for granted, as you were saying, Monique. It's not always like that. And I've been very fortunate. I haven't really had to work in an environment where I felt like I had to put on that heavy armor. That, knock on wood, hopefully that will not be my experience, but it's really a pleasure. It makes what we do a pleasure when we can feel comfortable and at ease on set. Not, so casual that we're not doing our job, of course, and not being professional. But you don't want to have to put on that mask and that armor and protect yourself from microaggressions and all kinds of stuff that then makes it not enjoyable. You don't enjoy being on set in those instances, and then you don't want to do what you do. And who wants that?
And so I'm curious, that first production that you talk about, can we find it somewhere? Is that something we can find and we do some sleuthing, with the title
Are
of
you
it?
talking about mine?
Yep.
It's not done.
Oh. It's still in the process.
Still working on it.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, we can't wait till you can announce it's out in the world.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that too.
And tell us a little about what you are, not just this one, because no documentarian ever has one project. So tell us, what are you working on currently?
So the project that I've been working on for the past 8 years it started out as a first person autobiographical look at the beauty standard, the white beauty standard, and its impact on Black women and girls. And that has iterated and morphed over the years because I've gotten older into a film about Black women, beauty, and aging that I'm going to look at through the lens of Black Don't Crack. And I want to look at both sides of Black Don't Crack, both the scientific phenomenon that the more melanin you have in your skin, the younger your skin looks. But the other side for Black women is that in spite of how we may look really youthful on the outside, but the stress, the trauma of life in America, of life in a world that is anti-Black and anti-woman, it takes its toll. And so we crack on the inside, even though we don't crack on the outside.
Well, it sounds like, a super interesting project.
I want to see it.
I do want to see it. I want to see how much joy you can bring into it, because it's got to have both, right?
Absolutely. It does have to have both. It does have to have both. And I have, like all of us, there's so many stories that I want to tell that have not been told. I'd love to look at early history of Black women in labor, meaning like the workforce and unions. I really want to do a film about Bell Hooks, the feminist author, because she, like Marlon Riggs, is another one of I'm going to call her an ancestor. I claim her as an ancestor because in many ways, the things that I know about being Black and a woman in America, I learned from Bell Hooks. So she's like a mother and an auntie to me. There are other stories that I, would love to tell, may or may not have the time left on earth to tell, but I get to engage in the type of storytelling that really means a lot to me by executive producing for younger filmmakers. So I'm serving as EP for a filmmaker named Rosita Cox, who's based in Durham. She's working on a film about Kinston, North Carolina, where she's from, and the fact that it is the top producer of NBA talent in the world per capita, Kinston, North Carolina, right? So I'm so excited about that story because she's going to be uplifting the community members who nurture this talent, who never get acknowledged. It's usually the coaches from college and their NBA coaches, but she's going to look at these coaches who nurture this talent on the middle school and high school level and get them to the point where they actually then take off and go to the NBA. So I'm really excited about Rosita's film. And I'm, looking forward to hopefully collaborating with Byron again. He has a couple of films that are in the pipeline that are all have some sort of social justice angle. And that is near and dear to my heart because I'm an activist filmmaker. That's really where I feel I am most alive. Yes. When I am doing that type of work, I want to change the world. And the way to do it, I think, is through documentary film.
I come from a different place. I love the small screen, and I was, obsessed with making TV and that sort of thing. So we've done some documentary work, not sustained. I find that we can make impact with media, right?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
And I think you are wisely and rightly choosing stories and examples of positive, uplifting portrayals rather than stereotypes. And I want to call it poverty porn, whatever you want to call it. So,
Yes. Yeah. No, that's in trauma porn.
right, trauma porn.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so, we've had our fill, people of color, women in general, have had our fill of this sort of, perpetuation of, oh, we're the victim. We don't do anything to have agency over our own destinies. Even in Disney, they're turning the corner on this, right? Not 100%, but they've turned the corner.
Yes.
So, I mean, part of this is, I feel like media and what we do and what we put out there is really important. What's your philosophy on, how you might coach somebody through what you're seeing? For instance, we were on a set and this fellow was doing a documentary. He was a white guy, nice guy, but he was not the right person to be telling the story. And it was coming out in a way that felt like, trauma porn, poverty porn. And he was probing for these questions that the subject was just like, I'll make up something if you want me to. I could kind of hear it in his voice. Like, how do you guide somebody through something like avoiding those stereotypes, avoiding that kind of portrayal?
I'm really grateful for this question because it takes me back to the work that I do full time, which is as director of DAWG. And the framework that we created a couple of years ago and released in 2022, it basically takes you step by step through the production phases, right? Research and development all the way to release and impact. But we created a sixth phase that we think is the first phase, which is reflection. And it embodies all the things that I talked about at the top of this conversation. Thinking about your proximity to a story, thinking about your biases, thinking about your intention in telling a story. What are you trying to do with this story? And how will it contribute to information that's already available about the subject matter or the person or the community that you're telling a story about? But also, is there a way that you can challenge dominant narratives about that person, place, or thing that aren't going to co-sign and underscore stereotypes, that exist about that person, place, or thing? Without that work, if you don't do that work before you start working on a film, you're likely to continue stereotypes, to continue sort of mythical narratives about the people in your film because you haven't really done the work to uncover deeper meaning, both for you and for them. And that's why we really, the DAWG framework really emphasizes collaboration, because we believe that film participants are the experts of their own lives. So who better to help you tell their story than the film participants? So that's what I would say. We don't believe that people who don't look like the people in their film can't tell their story, right? Although, there are plenty of stories that can be told about white folk, right? And it does seem that in many instances, white filmmakers want to tell stories about other races and cultures because they're curious, right? But if you don't do that work at the onset, you're likely to do harm. And really the framework that DAWG has developed, it's really at its core about reducing harm, mitigating it as much as possible, because so much harm is done when filmmakers, and it doesn't really matter what color you are, because once you have a camera in your hand, you got power, right? But when we don't do that work, we can unwittingly unintentionally harm our participants. We can harm our crew. We can harm our production team members in ways that we don't intend. But that doesn't really matter. Like, good intentions are not the excuse or the answer for harm, right? So I just think that we have to be more intentional and thoughtful about why we want to tell a story, and be honest with ourselves above all else. Because if we can tap into what our intention is, then we can begin to walk a path that is probably going to do a lot more good for our project and for the people that we need around us to tell that story than if we didn't do that work to begin with.
Amen. I always look at it as, sometimes when I'm in the midst of a production, what is your plan? If you want to take it down to purely financial gain, it's like, well, you're not telling any story that somebody else hasn't told, or someone who looks like you has told this story about someone that they don't understand. I'm in the midst of watching this being filmed, and it's like, you've decided the story that's being told, not the person that you're filming gets to decide what their own story is. From a person who's behind the camera, it's hard to be on a set like that.
It is.
So I want to honor what time we have here. Do you have something else that you wanted to ask in particular, since you now you got her on the spot?
I know. I'm like looking at my notes. I mean, you automatically said a lot of the things that I would want to hear from you. All I have left is, again, lots of thanks.
Yeah, lots of thanks. I'm going to do this, and this is going to take a minute, but I still want to hear, what kind of trends do you see out there for women behind the camera in this industry, in the documentary field?
I mean, I think that there are all kinds of opportunities, honestly. It's what happens when you have those opportunities. So what I mean is, if you are good, if you have done the work, you have like a reel that demonstrates what you're able to do, you're going to get hired by, or you're likely to get hired by someone. There is still a lot of, it's who you know, that exists. And I am very concerned that in this present political environment where DEI is being dismantled or, demonized, that's going to have a negative impact on the extent to which women, people of color, queer people, trans people, anyone who's not a white male is able to get the type of substantive opportunities that lead to you being able to like make a career out of the work. But the opportunities do exist. And there are many women that I can think of, from young emerging filmmakers to seasoned ones, who have made really groundbreaking, award-winning work, either as directors, producers. I'm thinking about the director Yoruba Richin, who, on the heels of completing Wilmington, what's the name of the film? The coup of American Coup, Wilmington 1898. Lord have mercy. On the heels of doing that, like, Yoruba is blazing, like she's doing the damn thing, right? And Yoruba is a Black queer woman, and she is having all kinds of opportunities to tell stories that a lot of us, dream about. Dawn Porter is another one. She just did Luther Vandross's, biography, basically, Never Too Much. I know, it's a wonderful film. And Dawn, she came out the gate, like, going for it. And they both have done really well. And I know young emerging filmmakers like Resita. There are young people coming out of Youth FX, which is an Albany-based documentary filmmaking sort of incubator that nurtures young BIPOC talent. And they have amazing filmmakers coming out of that environment. And a lot of them are young women of color. So we're coming, like, we're in the pipeline. I'm hoping that pipeline's not going to be shut down, right? In this moment when so much is being, shut down in terms of opportunities for people who look like us.
I'm going to go with the up note here and say that, we intentionally hire and we own our own business. We make our own space. A lot of people of color, that's what they do. We're very grateful that you're out there doing intentional things and opening doors and being a model and having shoulders to stand on. So we are grateful to you. And to be positive about it, I think that there are enough people already through the pipeline, in the middle of the pipeline, that will continue to allow those behind us to advance.
Yep, I agree. I plan to keep fighting to make sure that pipeline continues. And in any way that I can, if I can create an opportunity, not only for myself, but for others, I'm going to do it. And so I'm glad to know that you all are out there as well.
Yeah. So if somebody has questions, they see this podcast and they're like, hey, how do I get in touch with Natalie?
If you go to my website, which is nataliebullockbrown.com, you can send me an email through the website and I will respond, unless you're trying to, market something that's yours, right? But if you want to work with me, you want advice, you want to get into documentary, like I'm willing to talk to just about anybody. Hit me up on my website and I will respond.
Well, we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking today to talk to us.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. This has been so much fun, and I hope we get to have that real conversation with wine and popcorn at some point soon.
Next time you're in town.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Change the Reel. If you like the episode, subscribe.
Share it or leave a comment. And remember,
Representation starts here. Hasta pronto.
see you soon.